Welcome, viewers. This is Bhavik Kothari. Welcome to yet another episode of the Vllow podcast. Today, in this episode, we are going to talk about the mental aspects of cricket, which I think are very, very important. That's why I'm so excited about this episode. But before we begin, just a brief about Vllow Sports. We are a customized premium cricket equipment company. We have built a unique algorithm that matches the player with the cricket bat that works for him or her. Please check us out at vllowsports.com, www.vllowsports.com. So, Coach CD, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me over.
So again, I'm very excited because I firmly believe that the mental aspects of any sport is as important, and perhaps that's an aspect of sport that we don't pay as much attention as much as the physical aspects of the sport. And giving and investing analogy here, because that's what I do in my day job. Warren Buffett says that you don't need to be a great investor. You don't need an IQ of 140. You can do with an IQ of 120. In fact, a higher IQ ends up hurting rather than helping. I thought that was a very, very insightful comment that I'd heard from him. Now, this is decades ago. And I also think he was referring to the temperament. And in cricket, and especially batting, we talk about temperament a lot. And the temperament is basically the mental aspect of the game. We talk about it in terms of, and you mentioned that's a spectrum in some ways, and that gets developed over a period of time. But what are you seeing when you watch and observe a player? What comes to your mind when you're thinking about the various mental aspects of the game?
I totally agree with what Warren Buffett says. Yeah. Sometimes it does interfere with your thought process when you know too much. Too much of knowledge sometimes can be dangerous as well. Right? So I think if we're looking at cricket and the mental aspect of the sport as well, my general line for that would be, like I always try to form links between what happens from point A to point B. So I said your mental makeup is the bridge between your potential and your performance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What you're capable of and what you're actually capable of and what's the result that you're doing, it totally depends on how mentally strong or how mentally weak or challenged you are. Right? Top players want to be challenged. They're excited by the challenge of something, and that's when they're at their sharpest. Right? Weaker players shy away from challenges. Right? In terms of developing a player over the long term, we have seen a lot of kids, a lot of coaches, a lot of parents, a lot of centers, and we're referring to cricket here in specific, and maybe sport in general, do see a lot of emphasis put on technical aspects, some emphasis put on the training aspect, a limited aspect put on the aspect of tactics, but almost negligible or no sort of a specific catered training program to developing the mind. And that's one of the prime reasons that if you see that there are so many cricketers playing the sport and putting in so much of effort, but very few are able to break through the barrier. So I think a very important topic you have raised here, and I think this is something that we can keep talking about. And the mind is always a mystery, but we'll try and unravel some of that today.
So I was thinking of players that come to my mind who seem to have punched above their weight. And it's mainly because of the temperament or the mental aspects that they have mastered in some ways more easily, to put it one way, than other players. So MS Dhoni is the best example that comes to mind. What in your mind, what makes him a special player from a mental aspect, compared to other players that played in his generation?
My personal opinion on MS is that wherever he is, whatever he is doing, he lives in the moment. He is neither ahead of it, neither is he behind it. Okay. So whenever a player or a person has anxiety, anxiety is always caused from something that may happen in the future. Whenever they've had frustration or they're angry about something, they've had about something that has happened in the past. Both of them are affecting their present moment. Right? And the only thing that's in control of a player is what they can do in the present moment. And I think Dhoni has mastered the art of that. He is able to base his decisions, base his reactions or judgment calls that he makes based on where he is at the present moment, not worrying about what has happened or what will happen, and trying to put his best foot forward at that moment in time. And that's what separates him from the rest of it. Okay, just that simple aspect of understanding that the only controllable factor is now. Okay, and understanding the power of now and going through that particular emotion at that moment, and that's what separates him from the rest. And if most players are able to understand, and cricket is also played in a one ball game, so it's the now, this ball, not what has happened the previous, not what may happen. And that's what will give you more victories and and more successes than failures. I would put it as that way.
That's very interesting. I had never thought in those terms, but I agree. It's for a sports player, especially when split second decisions are being made, and obviously a lot of it is being driven by either the muscle memory or the subconscious mind in many ways. Being in the now, the here and the now, is so important, because there's a natural human tendency to think about either the past or what might happen in the future. Both might lead to some anxious situations and might impact what's happening the here and the now. It seems like, and I think Australia is the best example. Pat Cummins is another person who comes in mind when we talk about like mental strength. Australia, to a greater extent, has been able to, in spite of the population limitations, they've been able to punch above their weight for a very, very long time. And they seem to have almost institutionalized this concept of mental strength. And they've almost made it into their culture or their process. Any thoughts you might have on that?
Yeah, for my limited scope or knowledge of Australia, because I've not really traveled there, but my understanding of what they do and what they don't do is they place their team above anything else. I've read in a book that the difference between an Aussie parent and a parent whose rest of the world is, especially where we're talking about sports is concerned, when a kid enters the car, in most probably on the drive back home, the first question is in Australia is, so how did your team do, or did your team win? Okay. And this same study was conducted to a large extent in other places is, so how did your game go today? Okay. So the strength in numbers, the ability to hunt in packs, the ability to put team above themselves. And we know that when a team plays together, there is more strength in numbers and they achieve more, right? So now coming to that aspect of whether it's team versus individual, whether it's the win, getting each other's back. I also know for a fact that the Aussies may not be the best of buddies and they don't dine out together. But in their culture, they have sort of a ingrained this philosophy that you don't need to be the best of friends to be the best of teammates. Okay, and what I mean by that is, you don't need to be sitting out and hanging out holidays together with families and stuff, but you can keep your personal preferences aside when you play as a professional. So there's a single-minded goal over there, right? And when there's a single-minded goal, there's a single-minded ambition from a team that's been brought together, and it's ingrained in them from childhood. They buy into that much more easier, and that definitely helps them, feel strength in numbers and know that they've got each other's backs as long as they're on the field. And that in a nutshell is why they have won more World Cups than any other cricketing nation on the thing.
They always take their game to the next level when it comes to big tournaments
events.
or big events, and it's the collective mental strength or the team
Absolutely.
mental strength that takes them beyond their individual capabilities, I guess. That's very interesting. So maybe let's talk about, in your experience, what are the types of what kind of advice or guidance do you give players? Because I know you think about mental strength and temperament a lot, and that may not be ingrained in everybody's practice, at every point in time. But players, especially youth, they still need those nuggets of knowing the mental aspects of the game. And while they may not be able to do something immediately with that information, it seems like the awareness of that is key as they develop their game over the longer term.
Okay. So the first and foremost message that I would give to all players is, your mental training is as important as your technical training. Get that noted down. Now, when we talk about mental training, it is said that images have more impact than words. Okay, so it has been proven that the singular most successful mental training tool is visualization. Right? So are kids imparting visualization as part of their program? Okay, are they able to pay attention to any particular thought for the period that they want to pay for it? For example, I call it, this is my own theory, and I call it the toothbrush theory. Okay, we get up in the morning and most of us start off by brushing our teeth. And when we are brushing our teeth, we are rarely thinking about the tooth that's being brushed. It's every conceivable thought except the toothbrush.
Yes.
Right? Now, think about this in a high pressure environment of a cricket game where a batter has one chance to be dismissed. And he at that moment is trying to put his thoughts where he wants them to be, like maybe at the release point or looking at the bowler and, or picking the ball length or something like that. And the pressures of the sport is causing it to go all over the place. So I tell kids in a very, very simple way, start out by first recognizing that your thought is running away. Your thought is going all over the place. So say when you're brushing your teeth, if you're thinking about something else, try to bring it back to your tooth. If you're tying your laces and you're thinking of something else, shoelaces, and you're rushing to school, try to bring it back to your lace. You're reading a book, try to read the book, and if you feel your thought is drifted into the image of that book, bring it back again. Just recognizing this and becoming aware that your thoughts are somewhere else and you need it to be here will slowly train the mind in a non-stress situation to be able to focus on that particular aspect. So you're teaching the mind first to focus where you want it to be, first by being aware and then bringing it back. Now this is what top cricketers are able to do. They are able to cut out the chatter, the white noise, or all the other sounds behind, and bring those thoughts back for that particular small attention and focus it on the ball or the present stimulus that's coming from there. Right? Now, this needs to be a part of their daily process for them to be able to develop it on a larger scale. Okay? So I would say if you could start out just by learning the basics of visualization, visualizing your image of what you want to achieve, the outcome of what you want to achieve. Okay? Start out by that. see yourself in that particular role. Just visualize that. Even having pictures posted somewhere will help in the visualization process. One, that's which I call the external visualization. And once they master that, can they internally feel that process of where they are? You know, so understanding those emotions, those feelings, and particular stuff like that. So that is something that I feel will totally develop their brain. It will take time. I'm telling you, just as your technique will take time to develop, controlling and mastering your thoughts will also take time. And as we go forward, we will realize that not actually thinking but reacting is one of the most important aspects of batting. You know, as we go forward, I'll leave you with that.
I agree. I think visualization is such an important part of bringing the mind back to the here and now. And there's a lot of distractions, as you mentioned, especially in a game. There's a crowd, there is perhaps some sledging going on, and you have some internal pressures and pressures from team or coaches. A good place to start getting the mind in where you want it to be would be in the training sessions on a day-to-day basis. When you come into a training session and let's say you're batting, that's a good place, I think, to start for a player to start maybe focusing on one aspect, because there's not as much pressures as in a game. But once you start training yourself to get into that routine, you're able to better execute that even in games. And I completely agree. It's a process, and it takes a long period of time, just like developing a skill. The mental aspects are also skills, as you've said, and it takes time. So just having the awareness and recognizing the need to work on it on an ongoing basis helps you get there at some point.
Right. So how in practice, what the kid can do or what the player can do?
Yeah.
You know, I am a very strong believer that all top players and all top batters, if you're talking about batting and bowling, for example, they all have a pre-ball routine. The pre-ball routine is something that sets up not only the physical self but the mental self to either deliver or react, or whether you're a bowler or a batter, right? So if you see, for example, I've been observing our left arm fast bowler from Mumbai Indians. His name doesn't come to mind. The guy who opens the bowling from New Zealand.
Oh, Trent Bolt.
Mr. Bolt.
Yeah.
So Mr. Bolt, whenever he bowls, if you notice him, he'll first do a couple of hops when he starts out his bowling. He will toss the ball in his hand once or twice, and then he will give a smile to himself. He'll turn around and he'll start his bowling. Every singular game, he does that. Okay? And during one of the interviews, he was told, at least he mentioned that he says, when I do this is, okay, I'm ready. I'm accepting this challenge. And he smiles and says, it's a privilege to be here. Let's enjoy the game. Now, this is his pre-ball routine before he starts his thing, right? If you take a Brett Lee, when he used to bowl at his time, always had a deep breath out. His hands would move forward and then he would start running. Everybody knows a Virat Kohli will keep twirling his bat, and MS Dhoni will put his bat under his arm, remove that. And this is all the physical routine that is visible to everybody. What's going on in the mind, the mental routine? What are the talks that they're going? How are they silencing the doubts in their mind under high pressure, right? And telling the mind that it's okay. This is what separates them from the others. This is totally what separates them from the others, right? And I firmly believe it cannot happen without practice. You have to first and foremost, a batter has to have a pre-ball routine. He's got to able to silence his mind. His pre-ball routine may involve a lot of physical routines. It may involve him going out and just tapping, gardening, walking to the square leg umpire. We have seen so many of them. Okay, I've seen Rahul Dravid lips moving on camera when the camera zooms in on the face. He keeps saying, watch the ball. Okay. So he's indirectly reminding himself to watch the ball at that particular moment of time. And these are all mental triggers to get ready, to get ready for the stimulus that's coming ahead. So I recommend to players, I said, do you have 2 or 3 phases, like, that puts you in that zone of total belief? Like something that tells you, okay, you're ready, you love the challenge, or I'm a champion, or let's go. Develop those phases for yourself. Keep repeating it. Okay. Because when the element of doubt, it's that man that's talking to you in your own ear, and you need to hear a confident voice of that. Okay.
Right.
A lot of players have recorded these affirmation statements and put it in their ears pre-match to listen to it, listen to their own voice in their head telling them that they are the best. Okay. Or different, a whole load of other statements. Right. You need to do that. A pre-prep match, we have seen a Matthew Hayden sit down before a match, sit down on the ground, put the bat at his side, feel the bat in his hand, on the pitch, visualize the way he's going to approach the game. There are n number of photos on Google showing Matthew Hayden doing that. So that's what the player can take forward. As he visualized what he wants to do, what does he want to actually achieve from that particular aspect of that particular inning. Right. So these are a few things that in my mind that come immediately to mind, that I'm sharing some experience with the players to go out and search for it. But most importantly, I would say plan a time for yourself for mental training in your whole routine. It may start off for 5 to 10 minutes, and slowly, if you can increase it to 15 minutes a day and give it to that particular space, you will find that bridge between potential and performance is becoming so much more stronger and so much more wider.
So almost starting to create a pre-match and a pre-ball routine that helps you bring yourself back in the here and now, and that is critical to becoming better and more consistent over time. Do you also think that a huge role played is having the confidence, and a lot of time the confidence comes from knowing that I've really worked hard, and I have all the skills that it takes to be able to execute, or I've really worked and I'm at my optimal level of fitness, that whatever challenge this particular game throws at me, I can achieve it. So that confidence itself, it may not be the most important thing, but it definitely helps get into the here and the now a lot easier for a player compared to others.
I totally agree. I said, you see, it's always process oriented than outcome oriented. You want an outcome. You visualize the outcome, but it's your process that determines the outcome. So your process involves your preparation, the amount of efforts that you've put in, the amount of training that you've done. Okay, both physical, mental, and technical and stuff, and that will give you the confidence so that for you to achieve that outcome. And once you've done the processes, you don't really need to think too much of the outcome, because that will take care of itself. Right. So confidence is actually a byproduct of your process, if I may put it that. Right. And that confidence then gives you the desired outcome that you want to achieve.
A lot of times you see players go through like tough phases. I'm sure you've seen a lot of players, and you yourself as a player, I'm sure has gone through certain lean patches when things don't work, and especially batting is a high risk, high reward aspect of the sport, where the failure rate is so much higher. And a lot of times I feel like a few initial setbacks tend to bring down a player or drive them down the cliff even more so. And that's the time when they need to have not only some of these skills, the pre-match or the pre-ball routines, but almost some level of counseling. And perhaps this is where a sports psychologist plays a key role, at least with certain level of professional players, where the player can learn some aspects in which they can deal with those phases and start coming out. Then they would perhaps because it would take them even longer if they had to just deal with it and come out on their own. And the best of players have gone through phases like that. So it's no one special in that regard. Any thoughts on that?
One of the things that I learned as a coach is, first and foremost, it says coach the player, then the skill. Okay. So when you say coach the player, you should first know your player. Know him, try to understand him in good times and in bad. When he's at his peak performance, when he's not feeling up to it. Okay. When he's down. Okay. It's only when you know him, you will know how much he's ready to take, how much you can push him, how much he's ready to, accept from you. Okay. And at the most times, my understanding is that when a player is down, he's always examining the technical aspects of his game. Every failure or the physical aspects. I've seen a guy fail and he goes for 2 rounds of the ground. He fails again and then he goes for 3 rounds of the ground. And his coach, the similar. He kept failing and the rounds kept increasing. At the end of the summer camp, that guy was a better runner than a batsman. Right? You're getting what I'm saying. So they were addressing the physical. No, your footwork is work. But we have to understand that it's a split-second decision that a batsman takes. It's the mental aspect.
Yep.
Right? It's the decision. If you take a decision back, the decision back is, it starts with the action which we see, which was the reaction in his brain, and which was the emotion that actually was prevailing in his mind at that moment. Right? So if you go, it's emotion, reaction, and decision in that particular order. Okay? Or decision and reaction at the end, the other way. So if you actually put it down, and why a coach needs to understand his player, why a coach needs to understand a bit of the mental management aspects of it, okay, is that first and foremost, was it a mental error before it is a technical error? And most often than not, it's a mental error. Right? The attention wasn't there for that particular moment of time. Okay? The decision taken wasn't appropriate for that particular delivery or that particular situation. Right? So, when we are clear, unless the method of getting out or the mean of getting out is similar, he's getting out LBW all the time, for example, you know that there's a technical issue, he's playing across the line, then you address the technical aspects of it. Right? But most of the time it's a mental error. So, beautifully you said, disclaimer, I am no sports psychologist. I don't know the brain in any of its thing. But all I'm sharing with you is the experience of a cricketer and a coach now who's gone through the ups and downs of failure, and who's come out of it by being mentally stronger, may not be technically stronger. Right? And if you have the luxury of seeing somebody who's a sports psychologist, please do that. Please do that. Okay? Or a counselor for that matter. And I would suggest to all coaches, please also try to understand the basic inputs of how the mind works and what happens, because that would at least start off the kid in the right direction. Okay? Coming to your question finally of how do you deal with errors, right? What happens? And if you see most errors in a match, you can sort of predict a batsman getting out. There are signs of him, the way his nervousness, his body language, okay, his reactions to a couple of previous deliveries, and then there's something's gonna give, right? And then you see the dismissal. Like the more you know the player, you know what's coming.
True.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So there is a way that I would like to share that I learned from my gurus and all that, and they call it the 4R method, right? Which needs to be practiced in a practice environment. Like for example, you see a batsman making a mistake. He's chased a white ball. He generally shadow bats the correct thing, what he wants to do, maybe leave it and stuff like that. So he says, first and foremost, the first R is recognize what was the fault. Okay? Once you've recognized it, don't hold it back. Just recognize it. Be non-judgmental about it. Then release that fault. Release it. Then go back to your routine. The third R is your routine. And the fourth R is refocus on the next challenge that's coming your way. Okay? So it says recognize, release, routine, and refocus. Right? So these are the 4 R's that a player can build into his game on a daily basis. Right? Each time he makes an error, learn to deal with it with these 4 R's. Right? So once he's mastered that, he'll be able to deal with small minor errors when he's batting at the crease, or he's bowling, like if he's bowled a bad ball or he's misfielded or something like that way, in a much, much, much better way. Immediately that those 4-step process will go, and then he's back to his normal self.
Right.
Right? So that's one way that you can train and move forward.
You mentioned release, one of the second R. You mentioned visualization, being non-judgmental, quieting the mind. Thank you, first of all, to you for recommending the book, the Inner Game of Tennis. I think that's a great book. We'll put a link to that on the podcast, and I highly recommend viewers to read that book. And even though that book is on tennis, as the title suggests, there's a lot of transferable insights to any sports, but especially cricket. And I think the book really talks about the mental aspects of sport, cricket in our case, and really lays down some really, I would say, takeaways that you can implement in all aspects of your cricketing game. So that was a great book. I know you recommended it, and you do that to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite all-time books, written way back in '65 and updated editions later in that. And it's so pertinent because our sport is a stop-start sport like tennis. It's like tennis is played 1 point at a time. Cricket is played 1 ball at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many more transferables. So I thought Timothy Galloway did a good job, and I came across it, and yeah, it really helped my own understanding of myself as a human being, as a cricketer first and a coach later. And I keep going back to that book on and off, and to get new insights with the experiences and the newfound knowledge, or the shared experiences that I've had. Yeah.
And some of the things mentioned in the book are almost like counterintuitive. Like, one of the things is, don't try too hard.
Don't try too hard.
Because what ends up happening if you're trying too hard is it impacts your brain psychiatry in some ways, and it causes the body to not function the way you would want it to. So it might impact your grip. So by trying too hard, you might tighten your grip when you might actually not need that thing. So yeah, any thoughts that, like,
Yeah, absolutely.
That was very interesting. Like, don't try too hard.
Don't
That
try
was
too hard. I think, and that's where again I'm coming. I said when a guy fails, he goes back thinking that 300 balls, additional balls in the nets is the only way forward. Okay,
Yeah.
and I have had a lot of kids who have gone, and because they're all focused on the outcome, I'll give you. See, we've all grown up playing some sort of a video game. Okay, some sort of a game we played, and the high score says 200. Okay, next time you played, it went to 170. Third time you played, it went to 250 or 300 or 400 or whatever. Maybe you made an error and it's come down to 110 again. The game by itself does not take away a high score. Each time you put it, your high score is still there.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay, so that's the difference between the game. When we see it like that, we are mentally saying, I've done so much, I don't have to start from zero again. In a test you pass or fail. Right? When you write an examination, you've either qualified the examination and you've got the grade marks, or you've not qualified, or you failed. But in a game, nobody takes away a high score. But particular in sport, we believe that whatever 10 years work we have done, 4 failures in a row, we need to restart the whole process again. It's not there.
That is not the
It's
answer.
not the case. It's just that how you examine it. And most of the time, people put in the physical load. Again, I repeat, they're putting in physical load and not saying it's a mental thing that needs to be. They need to learn to relax. Right? You beautifully said the synapses in the brain, when you try too hard, it's like when you're trying too hard, there's more fear of failure, and that's why you're trying too hard rather than being excited by the thing of I'm going to get success. You're fearing failure, that's why you're trying too hard. You're not trying too hard to get success.
Right.
Right? So it's just that small change in the mindset that will allow you to function freely. Okay? Under the most pressure moments, the very famous Virender Sehwag thing is he says he whistles and he sings songs.
Yeah.
Indirectly, he's not trying to try too hard. He's saying, if there is pressure, there is. All I can control is my thoughts. So I want to relax first. Right? So a simple tip that I would give a lot of batters that I generally work with, and I give them that, is I say, on the back of your bat, I would see a lot of my batters have the words WTB and relax written on them on both sides of the shoulder of the bat. The WTB is watch the ball and the other thing is relax. So each time they pick up the bat and they are moving the action, they know that, okay, watch the ball, relax. So two things are telling them relax. Okay. Couple of things that help people relax and make better decisions is this process of centering, where they're able to breathe into the core of their body. Rather, it's an internal breathing that goes, and you focus where your stomach comes out and down twice, right? That sort of calms the whole system down, right? Practicing how to breathe and practicing centering as a process. I'm sure you guys can Google it and you will get a whole update on it. But that's one of the tools that definitely helps people be much more relaxed in pressure moments, right? So I think that's the takeaway I would like to give them when they're going forward. And coming back to your question, what was it? We drifted away from the topic a bit.
I think we drifted, but that conversation was so interesting, or the topic was so interesting, I forgot the question. I don't think there was a question. It was more of a discussion on the importance of not trying too hard. Because I think what ends up happening, as you said, is players who are going through a rough patch or not meeting certain levels of success, they feel like the physical load is so much important. You almost want to step back and analyze what's happened, why has it happened? Has it happened because of some physical deficiency or skill changes that are required, or is it just part of the game? That happens. So let's be not judgmental about it first, and let's focus on the process and not worry too much about the outcome. And as long as we are following the pre-match routine and the pre-ball routine, we should be fine with it. In fact, this brings up one interesting anecdote in my mind. This was Yuvraj Singh. This was in one of the T20 World Cups back sometime when we were playing against, India was playing against Pakistan, and 3 wickets had gone down. I think it was 8 for 3, and in comes Yuvraj Singh. And the bowler obviously was on fire, and he beat him a couple times. And you could see Yuvraj Singh just walk across to the square leg or towards the square leg umpire, come back. And the commentator said, I love someone like Yuvraj Singh because his attitude is, okay, so you beat me a couple times, so what?
Absolutely.
So that's his pre-match routine in some ways, because he's thinking the next ball.
You're beaten, it's over. You don't have to really get into the whole thing of that, right? You accepted that you're beaten, you recognize you were beaten, you release it and you move on.
It's also interesting. We talk about being in the zone. Many times commentators say being in the zone. I'd like to bring up yet another anecdote here of Virat Kohli when he hit Harris Roth for those 2 sixes, which everyone knows. And that game was a pressure game. It was almost the game was reliant on his shoulders. He had played for a very long time in that game, and he was in the zone. But I was hearing his interview. This was later when he was talking about those 2 shots that he played. Till now, he says, I don't really know how those shots happened. They just seemed to happen. And he said, it wasn't like I had practiced those shots.
Absolutely.
But he was so much in the zone in the here and now, of course, with some stroke of luck too. but he was able to execute that. It's almost like being in that state of subconscious mind, where you're able to execute at that level. That's just astounding.
So my belief is that when people say they are in the zone, what do they mean by that is that there's no distractions. In simple terms, right? They're able to cut out the distractions. They're able to cut out the most important thing is the word pressure. And that comes from having tremendous belief in their own abilities to handle the situation that's happening there. One, they know that irrespective of whatever that guy is going to throw at me or do from there, I have the capacity to handle it. Number two is they want it more than the other guy wants it. And number three is their processes and their practices and their experiences, they know that they can apply it to that particular situation, right? So they absolutely stop thinking about what can happen, just trusting their reactions. I say, does your training program that when you're training, are you training the action or are you training the reaction? Mentally, those guys are able to get into the zone, those who have trained the reaction. Coming back to our earlier podcast where I spoke about unstructured training, right? If everything is coming to you at the same speed at the same time, then you're training the action. Unstructured training helps you train the reaction as well. Right? Training with different balls, different surfaces, different conditions, different environments, all help you train the reaction. So a lot of top players, after they've moved past the basics of training the action, then get their minds to react to that particular stimuli. And that's when those reactions are spot on, unhindered. That's when they call they're being in the zone and they're able to perform to the best of their abilities. Right? It happens. You see, players sometimes are able to hold that for a whole season. They have 1,000-run seasons.
Yeah.
They get into being ICC Player of the Year awards or even maybe Domestic Player of the Year awards.
Right.
That's primarily because they've understood their game both mentally and technically and tactically. So coming back, it's a combination of all three. Your technical acumen, your physical acumen, based on understanding what you need to think in the situation is what brings you into the zone. So again, if you want to spend your more time in the zone, you want to spend more time allowing your reactions to take over, right? Like they say, some guys are instinctive pullers. They can't duck the ball. You bowl them a bouncer, they will pull you. It's because their reactions are trained to pull the ball. It's that they've not trained to duck the ball.
Right.
Right? Over a period of time, you will find that slowly, they are able to even duck the ball if they're staying in the cricket for a longer period. Right? I'll give an example of Rishabh. When he came into the game, he played a lot of strokes. He got out to silly strokes, 20s and 30s, here and there. And he gave a statement, I like to play my game. Okay? Then he was dropped from the side. He went back, did some work, came back again. You see a little more circumspect Rishabh. A little more. Okay? Not what he was earlier, like Mad Hatter hitting the ball. Then again he said, now I've learned to play in the situation. What is the demand of the situation? I play as per that. So he's not, stopped his own game. But at the same time, he's added to it by understanding the situation better. Now, a situation is demanded by what you think in your mind.
Right.
Right? So now he understands his mind better. He understands the situation better and using his strengths in that particular situation.
Right.
So it becomes so much more important that the mental aspect of the game, you've got to train for it. You've got to understand it. You've got to repeat in a simple word, bridge the gap. Bridge the gap between your training and your thing. That gap can only be bridged if you are able to constantly put yourself in the zone, constantly able to act. I would say, okay, to sum it up, I would simply say, in practice, your bat does the work.
Your bat does the work.
Okay? Your bat talks. In the match, your brain decides what you do with the bat. So if you exclude your brain from your bat in practice, your brain is bound to fail you there.
Hmm.
Okay? So include your brain during practice, and automatically the bat will do the talking in the match.
Makes sense.
Okay?
Yeah, that's a great summary. I think this has been an incredible episode. I think viewers will watch it, perhaps even rewatch it, because it's been a great episode. Thank you again, Coach CD, for your time, and we'll have you over for the next episode pretty soon.
Thank you, Bhavik. Thank you so much. Privilege as always. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks, viewers.